This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. Check out Squarespace through the link in the description below. More on them in a bit. Welcome to our exploration of yet another charming microstate. Following our profiles of the Vatican, Fiume, and Andorra, we return to what is arguably the oldest living republic in the world, the Republic of San Marino. Before we dive into this delightful republic, we have to get there. Let's pretend we're flying in. The closest international airport is in Italy, of course, in the city of Rimini. This is Federico Fellini Airport, named after the influential film director famous for introducing a surrealist and magical realist filter into the typical social commentary of post-World War II Italian cinema. Some of his masterpieces include La Dolce Vita, 8½, and The Knights of Cabiria. After you have impressed your travel companions with these cinematic facts, it's a short 15-kilometer drive to San Marino. So let's make our triumphant entry into San Marino, an independent republic entirely embedded within Italy. The landscape of San Marino is dominated by Mount Titano, 739 meters in height. Titano overlooks a national territory of 61.19 square kilometers, ranking San Marino as the fifth smallest country in the world. The climate of San Marino is predictably Mediterranean. Summers are warm and sunny, while winters are mostly mild, with frequent snowfall above the 500-meter mark. The terrain is mainly rugged and mountainous, meaning only 70% of the land is arable. The population is just below 33,000, which also makes San Marino the fifth smallest country by population demographics too. And for another fifth ranking, well, that's life expectancy. At an average of 83.5 years, San Marino citizens can boast top marks in the longevity category, trailing only Monaco, Japan, Singapore, and Macau. Much like its larger surrounding neighbor, San Marino's aging population suffers from a slow but steady decline. The estimated death rate in 2020 is 9 out of every 1,000 inhabitants, which is not quite offset by the birth rate of just 8.8 per 1,000. And if that wasn't enough, the migration rate is 6.6 per 1,000. The migration may be a consequence of San Marino's unemployment rate of 27.4%. The economy has been slowly declining since 2008, suffering from the general economic downturn and a decline in Italian export demand. Nonetheless, San Marino's economy is in general fairly developed. It relies heavily on tourism, banking, and the manufacture and export of a few chief goods, primarily ceramics, clothing, fabrics, spirits, and wine. The GDP per capita is $59,000, the 20th highest in the world. That's just $800 short of the United States. As is the case with many microstates, the economy benefits from foreign investment due to its relatively low corporate taxes. The income tax rate is also very low, about 1/3 the average of the EU. Now I imagine you're rather pleasantly exhausted from that cavalcade of fun facts, so how about you catch your breath with some sweet mountain air and the local cuisine? I would suggest you start with some street food typical of the wider regions surrounding the republic. That is a piadina, a form of simple flatbread made with water, flour, salt, and baking soda. Sometimes lard or olive oil is added into the mix. The dough is then flattened and cooked for 2 minutes per side on a hot surface. These piadinas are then stuffed with creamy cheese, rocket salad, and cold meats such as Parma ham and mortadella, which our US friends might know as bologna. When in San Marino, avoid pizza if you can. Pasta's a better bet, especially if it is the freshly made kind with an egg base. Tradition dictates that these are served with ragù, which non-Italians sometimes call bolognese. If you have a sweet tooth, you can like the two signature cakes, Tre Monti and the Titano cake, pretty much everywhere. The Monti, or Three Mountains, is essentially a giant round wafer biscuit stuffed with chocolate and hazelnut filling, while Titano alternates layers of almonds, honey, and peanuts with chocolate. So now that you're fueled up, I expect you're ready for round 2, the visit to the towers that have stood watch over the freedom and independence of San Marino for centuries. You can start the walk from Domus Plebis Square, leaving behind the neoclassical Basilica or Cathedral of San Marino. More on him a little bit later. Now you can walk uphill toward the largest and most visible of the towers, Torre Guaita, quite literally the watchtower. You may take some quick detours to visit some small but charming museums. First, the Museum of Vampires and Werewolves. You also have the Museum of Curiosities, which advertises itself as a collection of objects which are not only incredible but often quite unique. Our favourite piece has to be a pair of authentic sandals worn by a prostitute in ancient Greece. The undersoles are engraved so that every step would leave a footprint with the message, "Follow me." Finally, after much panting and sweating, you and your companion have made it to the top, the apex, the climax, where the tower stands in all its majesty. Originally built in the 11th century, the tower evolved into today's castle in 1463, when it was enlarged and fortified when San Marino was at war with the nearby city of Rimini. From the Guaita, the walk continues on the Passage of the Witches. Clearly, San Marino likes their spooky characters. It's a steep path and staircase that leads to the second tower, the Chester. This was used as a main barracks and lodging quarters for the garrison of the castles. Today it hosts a museum of weapons and suits of armor. The Chester is connected via a long wall with the third tower, Montale, a small pentagonal stronghold. It's the smallest of the three, but it could also be the most important because it was the furthest away from the city center. Therefore, it served as an early warning system against invasions. It's now time to walk downhill back to Liberty Square, where we can have a rest in front of the Palace of the Government. This is the central hub where all major institutions of the Republic reside. Built from 1884 to 1894, it mimics the late medieval architectural style. The revival of this style was a common occurrence in Europe at this time, and the San Marinese may have wanted to reference the golden age of Italian city-states from the 12th to the 15th century. For our architectural buffs out there, I will mention that the palace was renovated in 1996 by Italian architect Geo Lenti, famous for designing the Musée d'Orsay in Paris and the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco. It's also a great place for a quick overview of San Marino's unique history. According to legends, the Republic was founded by a Christian stonemason from Dalmatia called Marino. In 257 AD, Marino reached Rimini, where he worked for a time until he had to flee because of Emperor Diocletian's persecution of Christians. In his flight, he hid and eventually settled on Mount Titano. The legend goes that he had the power, or simply the skill, to heal the sick. Back in those days, the Titano was private property owned by Lady Felicita. When Marino healed her ill son, Felicita rewarded him with the whole mountain. Over time, Marino became the leader of a Christian community who sought refuge from the heel of the emperor. When Marino died in the year 301, his last words to his acolytes were, "I leave you free from both men." These two men are believed to be the emperor and the pope of the early Christians. With such a blessing, Marino was encouraging his community to declare themselves independent from both powers. The first document, beyond legend and myth, that speaks of San Marino is a piece of parchment dating from the year 885, related to a legal dispute on the ownership of some plots of land. This document states that the land is rightfully owned by the abbot of a monastery in San Marino. It was only in the late medieval period when the dwelling on Mount Titano began to self-identify as an independent political entity, a commune or Italian city-state. The commune was self-governed by the Arengo, an assembly of the heads of the most notable families overseen by a rector. As the population grew, the rector was joined by a captain defender in 1243. These two rulers were also known as the two consuls, a phrase reminiscent of the ancient Roman Republic. Their titles were later changed to captain regents, and they were term-limited to 6 months of co-rule. Even today, the heads of state are called captain regents and are elected every 6 months. Some of the Italian communi were expansionists, either via the power of their navies like Pisa or Venice, or their banks like Florence. Many more suffered from a lack of unity and became the plaything of their neighbors or of European invaders to the north. By and large, though, San Marino remained independent even throughout perilous times. It's entirely possible that just nobody noticed them. San Marino was only invaded twice, the first time in 1503 by the real-life Jaime Lannister, Caesar Borgia. The occupation ended when, in a strategic masterstroke, Caesar died. This was good because there was absolutely no way the San Marinese could have freed themselves from that guy otherwise. The second occupation came in 1739, and at the time San Marino was surrounded by and under the protection of the Papal States. All of that changed when Cardinal Giulio Alberoni came along, invading the area and assuming command under the name Pope Benedict XIV. The people of San Marino started a campaign of civil disobedience which reverberated throughout many European courts who were sympathetic to the cause of the little guy. Eventually, Benedict relinquished control of San Marino a few months later, on February 5th, 1740, and everything went back to normal. The next potential invader was the steamroller from Corsica, Napoleon. But if you watched our episode on Andorra, you know that Bonaparte had a soft spot for microstates. In 1797, the general made a formal signal of friendship to San Marino, sending gifts and even offering to extend its borders east to the Adriatic Sea. It was a fantastic present that the Captain Regents declined to accept. In 1849, the city-state dodged another bullet, this time made in Vienna. In 1848 and 1849, Romans had kicked out Pope Pius IX and installed a republic defended by legendary General Garibaldi against the armies of France, Austria, and local reactionaries. Against an alliance like that, though, the Roman Republic was inevitably overrun and Garibaldi fled with his volunteers. On July the 31st, they found sanctuary in San Marino. When the Austrians demanded entry to San Marino in pursuit of Garibaldi, the authorities managed to stall them long enough with a lengthy negotiation for access, allowing Garibaldi and friends to escape safely at night and thus preventing another invasion. In 1861, Italy was unified as a country under King Victor Emmanuel II, who never expressed the intention to annex San Marino. His only involvement with San Marino was the request for a joint convention aimed at establishing good neighborhood, as well as some assurances of military protection. This treaty, signed in 1862, was the first time in which the Republic of San Marino was recognized as a sovereign state. Well, sort of. On May 7, 1861, San Marino had already been recognized by another tiny republic all the way across the Atlantic Ocean, and that was the United States. The Captain's Regent of San Marino, on March 29, 1861, sent a letter to President Abraham Lincoln offering honorary citizenship. On May 7, 1861, Lincoln accepted the offer, replying, "Although your dominion is small, your state is nevertheless one of the most honored in all history." With his reply, Lincoln had formally acknowledged San Marino as a sovereign state 1 year earlier than Victor Emmanuel. Now, if you're looking to get recognition for your brand new state, you should definitely get a website, and the best way to do that is with today's sponsor, Squarespace, or maybe, you want it for something more realistic. Two simple things. Maybe you've got some idea for a website or a business or a YouTube channel, a podcast, something like that. Well, the only way to figure out if that is worth doing is to get it out there to the world. And this can be daunting because it's scary to go and do new things, but not having a website is not a good excuse. There's no excuses with Squarespace. Squarespace allows you to create a powerful website for whatever you're up to. Want to sell something online? Yes. Easy to set up a store with Squarespace. Start a podcast, a YouTube channel? Well, you'll absolutely want a website to complement it. It all starts on Squarespace with a beautiful template that you can customize to your heart's content, or you can start from scratch if you've got the design chops, and then once you've got it up and running, everything is super easy to manage. There are no updates, there are no patches, there's no tech BS that you have to deal with. And Squarespace also handle all of the website-y stuff, like I say, podcasts, they do, mailing lists, social integrations, it's all there, so you can just go and get started right now. And also 24/7 customer support, so that's a great thing. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial. When you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/geographics and you'll get 10% off a purchase of a website and a domain. And let's get back to the video.
Away then, or remain your fame, if it changes the same, mine is no more.
Due to its geographic location, San Marino was bound to experience the same 20th century turmoil as its Italian protector. So when fascism took over the peninsula, it had similar effects on the small republic. In early 1920, many Italian left-wing dissidents sought refuge in San Marino, either from the government, not yet fascist at this stage, or from the violence of the Blackshirts. In September 1920, the local communists grew in number and power, even attempting attempting to set up a Soviet within the tiny republic. The events in San Marino mirrored those taking place at Italy at that time: growing unemployment, social unrest, and dissatisfaction amongst workers. There were also concerns among the middle and upper class that communism might gain power. And to those concerns, the fascist militias seemed like the perfect antidote. On May the 11th, 1921, it looked as though the fears of communist violence were justified when a philo-fascist doctor was assassinated on Mount Titano. This triggered the ire of Italian fascist leader Italo Balbo, later to become the head of Mussolini's air force. He took the occasion to launch a raid on the Republic, but no violence took place. Based on what happened next, this looked like a ploy to simply scare the captain regents into adopting authoritarian measures to prevent further riots. A limitation in civil liberties ushered in the next phase. In August of 1922, the Fascist Party of San Marino was founded. 2 months later, 2 fascist captain regents were elected into power. Now check that date, October the 1st, 1922. Mussolini was appointed Prime Minister of Italy exactly 4 weeks later on October the 29th. That means that San Marino holds the record for being the first country in history to fall under fascist rule. The Republic remained under fascist rule for the next 22 years, although San Marino stayed neutral during World War II. During this period, the local party was expected to fall in line with dictates from Rome and Berlin, but as usual, the San Marinese were able to maintain a certain degree of independence. For example, they resisted adopting racial laws until 1942. Both before and after that date, San Marino was able to shelter many Jewish refugees from Italy and Germany. In November 1939, the very first refugees arrived, 2 German women, mother and daughter, who had fled after the Kristallnacht. They were followed by more refugees, mainly Italian couples of mixed Catholic and Jewish religion. Since 1938, mixed couples were free to marry in the churches of San Marino. After September 1943, the German occupation force in northern Italy kept a close eye on San Marino. On the 25th of October, the San Marinese even welcomed a visit from Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. Officially, it was just a tourist trip for him, but the authorities took the occasion to negotiate a respect of San Marino's neutrality by the Germans. With the Wehrmacht kept diplomatically at bay, the Republic would not stop offering sanctuary. As the Allies began bombing the cities on the Adriatic coast, the government opened their doors to the evacuees, allowing for more Jews to find safety unnoticed among the other refugees. A key figure was one Ezio Balducci, who for a period was the sole ruler, replacing 2 captains. Balducci maintained a good relationship with the Germans while hiding Jews under their noses. When questioned by military authorities in November 1943, he firmly denied the presence of Jews in San Marino. The Germans were convinced, and on more than one occasion, Ezio was able to prevent the SS and the fascist brigades from entering his country. As we wrap up the historical narrative, let's return to our pretend trip to San Marino. You might be noticing some stirring of uniforms in front of the palace of the government. It's the change of the guard, a ceremony beloved by tourists and locals alike, and it's a good time to introduce the military of San Marino. The Republic of San Marino is historically a neutral country, with its defense duties delegated to Italy. Still, it does have a military, mainly with ceremonial and police duties. First, there are the dapper ones, the Guardia di Rocca, or the Fortress Watch. Their uniform would not be out of place at a Beatles concert. These guys wear a green double-breasted tunic adorned with red and white strings and golden epaulets. Their trousers are red with a single green vertical stripe. Everything is topped by a leather helmet sporting red and white ostrich feathers. The Fortress Watch works alongside the uniformed company of militias, which are mainly ceremonial and include the military brass band. There is also a more specialized corps known as the Noble Guard, which is essentially a company of bodyguards that protect the captain's regents and the other members of the executive office. As specialized as they may be, those guys will never match the multicolored awesomeness of the elite corps of crossbowmen. These 70 soldiers keep alive the tradition of a unit that was first formed in 1295. Clad in brightly colored medieval costumes, these accurate shooters of lethal quarrels show up at local festivals, usually preceded by marching bands of pipe and drum players and flag wavers. The authorities of San Marino naturally realize that not all crimes are committed in the context of a Renaissance fair, though. That is why why they also field 2 regular police forces, the gendarmerie and the civil police. They wear standard uniforms and use boring, modern-day equipment like cars, handcuffs, and radios. But how much action do these cops really see? Well, violent crime is virtually non-existent. So is visible property crime, which is mainly limited to minor theft. But that does not mean that an invisible kind of crime is not present. The San Marino security forces often collaborate with Italian police forces to crack down on white-collar crime and banking malpractice. In an investigation spanning 5 years, from 2009 to 2014, San Marino and the Italian tax police uncovered a massive tax evasion ring involving almost 59,000 individuals who had moved their assets to and from San Marino. When the news broke in August 2015, the tax police managed to incriminate 1,050 of these tax dodgers who collectively had failed to pay more than €1 billion to the Italian revenue services. Halfway through the probe, and probably because of this scandal, the government of San Marino was pressured by the International Monetary Fund to introduce more rigid controls on its banking system. However, dishonest firms have still taken advantage of legal grey areas. In September 2014, 2 companies operating in Italy but registered in San Marino were able to avoid paying taxes in both countries. The ever-watchful tax police cracked down on them, seizing €23 million worth of unpaid taxes. This past decade, San Marino has also had to contend with another much more dangerous kind of felony, and that's organized crime. I'm oversimplifying an elaborate, complex story here, but here are the basics. In the late 2000s, a gentleman named Francesco Vallafuco became an associate of Fin Capital, a local investment banking firm. This guy wasn't an ordinary investor, though. He was the boss of the Camorra, the equivalent of the mafia for Naples and the surrounding region. Vallafuco used Fin Capital money to fund a thriving building business, racking up contracts from local political authorities in and around San Marino. At one point, he was managing 52 building sites at the same time. All of this activity was procured through Fin Capital's director, alleged to be quite cozy with local politicians. The 2 partners in crime concocted another simple scheme. They set up a bakery. This seems innocent enough, right? Except that in 2009, their bakery won a commission from San Marino to provide bread for all school lunches in the Republic. The bakery piled up clients mainly from local government authorities in and outside of San Marino. A steady supply of low-quality bread, up to 5 tons a month, sold for a hefty profit. But don't think that crime always pays in the Italian peninsula. Schools started to file complaints about the poor quality of the bread, and all contracts were rescinded. Then, in October of 2010, one of Vallafuco's henchmen made a big mistake. This guy was called Frank Sinatra. No kidding, Francesco Sinatra to be precise, but that's Frank in Italian. Mr. Sinatra had a side gig lending money to San Marinese entrepreneurs. When one of them didn't pay a debt, Sinatra had him beaten up and threatened at gunpoint. When the threats extended to his children, the entrepreneur finally reported Frank to the Italian police. This was the beginning of an inquiry and trial that ended with the arrest of Vallafuco in 2013. Another consequence of the whole affair was that in July 2011, San Marino established its own anti-mafia commission, modeled after the Italian equivalent. As of 2020, San Marino's anti-mafia commission has to face yet another scheme concocted by organized crime, and that's environmental crime. This group has been considered by Europol as a major threat, active in Europe, Canada, the US, Colombia, and Australia. Members of the syndicate were able to infiltrate waste collection and disposal businesses in San Marino and the surrounding region. Their script was simple: win contracts from public or private clients, collect all sorts of rubbish and waste, and dispose of it, in the cheapest way possible, of course, which inevitably means in the most illegal and least environmentally friendly way. As of today, that case is still open, and we wish San Marino the best. On a lighter note, it would be unfair to close our trip on such a sour note. So let me lighten the mood by talking about 2 activities in which San Marino has left its mark: sports and music. The Olympic Committee of San Marino is incredibly active for a microstate. They have managed to train and send a team to almost every edition of the Summer Olympics since 1960 and to 10 Winter Olympics starting in 1976. The San Marino delegations at the Cold War Olympics of Moscow 1980 and Los Angeles 1984 were particularly numerous, with 14 and 19 athletes taking part respectively. Out of all of them, 2/3 competed in some form of bellicose discipline such as clay pigeon shooting or judo. perhaps a sign of those tension-riddled times. In any case, the San Marino team performed exactly as you'd expect from a microstate. They've won exactly 0 medals in their Olympic history, but surely they deserved gold for ingenuity. Willing to pick a fight with guys their own size, the Olympic Committee in 1985 created the first Games of European Small States. It was a small-scale Olympics taking place every 2 years, involving the likes of Andorra, Liechtenstein, Monaco, Luxembourg, Malta, Cyprus, and even not-so-micro-states like Montenegro and Iceland. San Marino fared better in those games as compared to the Olympics, winning a total of 323 medals, 62 of which are gold. Now, all of this might be a bit amusing, but San Marino has been able to produce at least one world champion in a pretty serious sport. And that's MotoGP racer Manuel Poggiali. Often misidentified as Italian, the San Marinese speedster secured the world title in the 125cc category in 2001, aged just 18. He won another world title 2 years later, this time in the 250cc. San Marino is not afraid to go against the big guys in a totally different field, the Eurovision Song Contest. Since their first entry in 2008, San Marino has challenged the most gifted singing voices in Europe 10 times, reaching the grand final twice. The last time it did so was in Tel Aviv in 2019, where singer of Turkish origin Serhat snatched a 19th position with the infectious tune of Say Na Na Na. But when it comes to music, the hearts of many San Marinese will swell with pride only at the mention of its most famous son, Little Tony. He was born Antonio Ciacci in 1941, and at age 16 he formed his first rock and roll band with his brothers. His first role model was Little Richard, hence his choice of stage name, but he later starred himself as an Italian-speaking Elvis. Little Tony produced an avalanche of hits in Italy, but he also had success in Latin America and other European countries. His notoriety in the English-speaking world was limited because, well, we've already got Elvis. But his 1960 ballad, Too Good, recorded in English, did reach number 19 in the UK singles chart, and in 1993, Little Tony starred in a Cannes Jury Prize-winning film, Raining Stones, by Ken Loach. As far as I can remember, that's something Elvis could never boast. Little Tony died of lung cancer in 2013, but only 2 years later, his name would make headlines again, involved in a minor scandal. It all started with a little girl in Gangia, a village in the province of Palermo in Sicily. All she wanted for her 8th birthday was a cake decorated with characters from a popular cartoon series about magical talking horses. Her parents dutifully sent the order to a local pastry chef. Rainbow Dash, Pinkie Pie, and the gang have taught us that friendship is magic, but so is the power of typos. We can only imagine the look of shock and awe when the girl unwrapped the cake, only to find a photographic rendition in icing sugar of Little Tony's face staring back at her. And I believe that this is perhaps the most useless fact we've ever covered on Geographics. But before we go, let me thank you for your attention to this exploration of San Marino, and let me ask you, what microstate would you like to see next? Let us know in the comments below. Please do hit that thumbs up button, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.